It is the most complex infrastructure project funded by Joe Biden. It will provide a third tunnel across the Hudson River between New York City and New Jersey, one of the most important interstate links in the country. As the vehicular traffic has increased across the Hudson River over the last 50 years, there has not been one additional lane added to that crossing. New York Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, for 24 years in the Senate, was a champion of a tunnel that never got built. So were some New York governors, New York City mayors. No one could get it done. No one. Then came Joe Biden. Construction began this year on the new tunnel. For the next 100 years, people will be driving through that tunnel and they will have no idea who did that. They should call it the Biden tunnel. Secretary Pete Buttigieg is back with us, and you know Donald Trump is going to take credit for that tunnel.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we've created a pipeline of good projects that are going to play out over the next few years. When I called projects like the Hudson River Tunnel the cathedrals of our infrastructure, I didn't say that just because it's a poetic word for something big. I said it bearing in mind that the thing about the world's great cathedrals is the hands that laid the cornerstone of those cathedrals weren't even around 100 years later when other hands laid the keystone. And while some of the projects we're funding, like a streetscape project to make an intersection safer, really can be done in 1 or 2 construction seasons, others, even working at warp speed, are the work of a decade or more. But President Biden deserves the credit for making these things happen because so many others before him promised and failed to get it done. I'll admit, one of the few times that I was fooled by Donald Trump was when I was a mayor and he said he was going to do a big infrastructure package. I thought, why not? It's good politics. Both parties would like to see it happen. Why wouldn't he do that? And plus, it seems to be something he talks about all the time. Of course, they didn't. But Joe Biden did. And it was an amazing thing to watch, especially because the bipartisan nature of that deal really specifically vindicated his model of how to get things done in this town at a time when people said, that's just not how it works anymore. And what's resulted is even more things that people said were impossible have happened. Of course, they said it was politically impossible to do this. But another thing that they told me growing up was impossible was for union jobs and manufacturing jobs to come back to the industrial Midwest in places like where I grew up. They told us that was all done. Never
we
again.
Didn't even think that that was governmental action. We just thought, well, private enterprise does a factory here, or they don't, or they move a factory. The idea that government could get in here and influence what private industry is doing was something that people weren't even really thinking about before this presidency in any serious way.
You weren't allowed to use terms like industrial strategy. And yet the results of the industrial strategy are that factories are rising out of the prairie in places like northern Indiana, where I grew up, and Michigan, where I live now, and Kentucky and Kansas, where I've visited facilities that would not be happening if it weren't for things like the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS and Science Act and the infrastructure.
Can I just stop you on that point for a moment, just because of the politics of it, because we're trying to teach both what's been done here and the political implications. When you say rising out of the prairie, somewhere in what I've been reading about this, it indicated something like 80% of the benefits of that kind of activity are happening out there in the Republican prairie, where, by the way, there's plenty of room to throw up a new factory. It isn't easy to throw up a new factory in Los Angeles County. There's not a lot of room. But out there, there's plenty, and that is where it's happening.
That's right.
And you're not going to get any political credit for that.
Well, right now, people in the building trades in some of these communities are telling me they're having the biggest year they've ever had just building these factories. But yeah, they're not even online yet. Actually, most of these major factories and facilities are slated to come online in 2026, some in 25, many in 2027. So I think we're going to have a responsibility, and I certainly, whatever I might be doing by way of a day job, I will be reminding everybody who will listen, and quite a few people who maybe won't, that these things are happening because Joe Biden made sure that American manufacturing would come back.
You will have a seat here anytime you want it to remind people